Hi, everybody. It's Brett Bell here from Grassroots Online for episode 22 of our weekly video podcast, which we entitled RootsCast. Actually, Mark is not here. He's not with me this week. He's actually feeling sick. He's lost his voice. So I decided that rather than not give you a weekly video podcast, which we always like to do every week, I would actually spend a little bit of time talking about a couple issues here solo. So you only have me today, which I hope will be okay, and Mark will be with us next week, and he'll be back in the mend, and we'll be able to chat as we usually do. So there are two topics that I wanted to discuss. The first one is with regard to the Ontario provincial election. As you know, from the last couple of weeks, both Mark and I are here in Ontario, so we're watching the provincial election very closely. So what we wanted to do is focus a little bit on some of the digital goings-on the election trail. One thing specifically I want to discuss, and I think that, again, this might be for Ontario, but I think the reason why I bring these items up is because I think that they apply to everybody, is that I want to talk a little bit about engagement. So the good folks over at Full Duplex, Mark Blevis and his team over at Full Duplex, actually put out an infographic regarding current engagement over the last 3 weeks for the Ontario election. So I'm going to share that because I want to go through some of the findings, and I want to sort of talk to you a little bit about this and talk about what they mean. So if you're looking at this, and I'll post the actual infographic so you can take a look at it yourself. But one of the things that in looking at the data, there's a couple things that I wanted to show you. The first one is, and I think they're worth noting. The first one is, so it's a great infographic, sort of going through how many, who's following who and all that kind of stuff. Really, really interesting things. But the first one I want to note is that tweets by party leaders since April 30th. If you look at that list, it might be a little bit difficult to see based on your screen resolution, but if you're looking at the different colors, red is for obviously Kathleen Wynne, the Liberals, blue is for Tim Hudak, orange is for Andrea Horath, and green is for Mike Scribner of the Green Party. But it's interesting when I'm looking at these numbers. These are tweets by party leaders since April 30th. Kathleen Wynne's numbers are going up. As you can see, the numbers are going higher. Andrea Horwath's is going up a little bit, but not as much. And then Tim Hudak's are well, I guess it peaked, but now it's going back down. So it's interesting to see, and of course Mike Scribner still in the Green Party obviously is by leaps and bounds number of tweets far surpassing everybody else. Obviously, he's trying to get some attention with his party and his issues. So kudos to him. But it's really, really interesting to see this data because you're seeing that actually the number of tweets specifically. What I noticed was Tim Hudak's is actually going down versus the number of tweets from the other party leaders are generally going up. So really, really interesting there. Again, isn't necessarily a good use of his time. I think that could be argued, but I think probably what I'd suggest is that I would guess that Kathleen Wynne's specifically and to a lesser extent Andrea Horwath are probably being done by staff. So that's something it's just an interesting footnote that I want to use because when you have data like this, aggregated data, you could see these kind of things. The other thing I also wanted to show was actually Facebook, and I think this to me is probably the biggest one that I wanted to show, and I thought it was really, really interesting. So the top, if you can see it, the top bar graph is the number of likes that they have on Facebook. Party leaders have on Facebook. Not a huge deal. I don't go by it. These are what we call vanity metrics, which to me doesn't really mean much. But if you look, the top is Kathleen Wynne, Tim Hudak, Andrea Horath, and you can see Tim Hudak has the most likes at 29,239 versus 22,495 for Kathleen Wynne, and then just over 21,000 for Horath, Andrea Horath. But if you look at what the second metric is, which is talking about this, and what Facebook considers talking about this are any kind of engagement that a Facebook page has. So whether that's number of likes, whether it's comments, shares, anything like that, any of that kind of basically engagement with a page, that's the aggregate number talking about this. If you look at the number, specifically Kathleen Wynne, you can see her engagement is by far incredibly larger than the other ones. Now, it is possible, and I want to say this because I think it's really important, that could be also number of likes. So if for example, the Liberals, the provincial Liberals, are engaging in a current, like an ad campaign or anything like that, where they're gathering likes, that could explain the amount of engagement. But even if that's not the case, let's say some of it is, let's say half of that is buying likes, right? Going out and getting likes, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But the level of engagement that the Liberals and Kathleen Wynne have is far surpasses Tim Hudak's PCs and Andrew Horace NDP. So that to me is a much more important metric. So you're seeing that there's lots of activity going on that page. There's lots of discussion and all that kind of stuff. So that really shows to me more than anything. And again, I'll post this this very interesting infographic on our in the comments. It says to me that there's, again, likes, it doesn't matter to me. It doesn't matter. You can go buy them or whatever the case may be. But this really shows that the engagement in terms of the Liberals far surpasses the other parties. So they're really, really successfully engaging people in their content, at least based on this data. So kudos to them. I really wanted to point that out. It's really interesting to look at this aggregated data. We can also look at here, you can see the number of issues that are tweeted. So the top issues being discussed are employment, which I think is kind of interesting. Employment, taxes, energy, economy, the education. So interesting sort of insight to the election at the time. So really, really interesting stuff. Amazing. So, you know, from what I'd say from a Facebook point of view, really, it's not about how many likes you have in the community that you've built. It's really built about how active your community is. In this particular case, I would say that the Liberals, at least for now, the Ontario Liberals are really passing all of the other parties in terms of what they're doing. So, kudos to them. I'll give them credit for that. The second topic that I want to talk about, and again, this is a very, very difficult. It's difficult to do with only one person. I feel like you know, only taking a breath every every couple minutes, it seems like. So, but the second topic that I want to discuss is NationBuilder. So NationBuilder is I'm going to share this screen here. NationBuilder, for those who don't know, is a pretty popular platform right now in terms of let's switch over here. NationBuilder is a platform basically that allows people to say turn your life into a movement. So a fairly low cost platform that allows a number, like mostly political campaigns, either candidates or causes and organizations, to fairly cheaply offer a number of tools on their website. So it integrates databases. You can collect information. You can take donations. You can integrate with your social accounts, so Facebook, Twitter, all that kind of stuff. We here at Grassroots Online have used NationBuilder, so we have no problem with NationBuilder. We've used a number of sites that we built on that, and actually, right now it's pretty popular. Right now, I'm just thinking in the Canadian political space, it's all over the United States, both in the Democrats and Republicans. But if you look at the Canadian space, I've mentioned, you know, the Ontario NDP just recently launched a site with NationBuilder. We have Naheed Nenshi, the sort of noted mayor of Calgary, who spends a lot of time, you know, very engaged online. He uses it. 4 of the 5 major mayoralty candidates in the Toronto race are using NationBuilder, so it's a well-known platform. This week, NationBuilder actually suffered a DDoS attack, so a denial of service attack, where their systems were down for I think probably about 4 or 5 hours, and this was actually on the eve. In this particular case, it was interesting. This is actually this is on the eve of the primaries in a number of states in the United States. But it's interesting, the person who was making the attack, or the parties that were responsible for the attack, this denial of service, and just so you know, a denial of service basically floods a system or a website with so much information, so many queries and different information, that basically blocks out everybody else. It sort of clogs up all of the ability for people for information to go back and forth between your browser and the server. So it basically denies service everywhere else, and you can't actually access it. So pretty much all of the NationBuilder hosted sites went down, including the mayoralty ones. I saw reports that a number of them were down. A number of different sites went down, and it was actually, according to the perpetrators, the people who created this DDoS attack, they said that they were doing it in response to political stance taken by one of NationBuilder's customers. There was some speculation that it was because of the primaries, but a lot of people believe it was actually a UK issue, the UK Independence Party, and whether or not that was actually the specific target. So they haven't said specifically which target it was. That might come out in later dates. But it's interesting because it made me think, or want to consider whether or not NationBuilder, that could be a liability for NationBuilder. NationBuilder is a great, as I said, it's a good tool, cost effective, works really, really well. But the problem that you have when you have a system like that that's sort of interlocked with so many different other platforms, like so many different websites, when NationBuilder, as an example, when NationBuilder, the platform, is the subject of an attack, everything goes down. So I'm pretty confident that NationBuilder is going to be taking steps to mitigate that and make sure that doesn't happen. But it starts to make you wonder whether or not having something like that can be a liability, and it's something that you need to consider when you're looking at a platform. It's very popular, and if you're running an advocacy or a political campaign, you or your IT people are probably looking at NationBuilder. The interesting thing that you have to ask yourself is whether or not that it's a liability. If you were using, let's say, WordPress or some other website, you wouldn't have been affected by any of the NationBuilder stuff. So it's an interesting liability or potential liability. Now, any server can be, to be fair to NationBuilder, any server, any service can be the subject of a DDoS attack. If somebody decides that they want to target you or your host, for example, like GoDaddy or Media Temple or any of those kind of things, you too can be taken down by something else that's happening in somebody else's, because of some other act by somebody else who happens to share a server with you. So it doesn't mean you're out of the clear just because you don't use something like NationBuilder, but it's something that you need to keep in mind. The one thing I would say, and this is something that I think is a relatively widely held belief now, I think it really brings this to the forefront, is I think this speaks to the fact that there needs to be more competition in terms of these platforms like NationBuilder, where you have NationBuilder right now is largely the only game in town. So if you actually, if there's more competition in these kind of things, you do have the ability to, it mitigates that kind of stuff, because not everyone will go down because you're not all on the same platform. So right now, NationBuilder is kind of the big dog, and I think that if you're able to do that and you're able to actually increase competition, increase the number of options that people have for these types of services, which is a low-cost platform that allows you to collect money, collect emails, all that kind of stuff for the advocacy and political space, I think that's going to be a good thing. So I wanted to comment on it because I think it's important. NationBuilder is a very, very popular program right now. I come across it all the time. People are using it, and I want to make sure that you know that this can't happen, right? When you become a very popular platform, you're a target of attack. So it's something that I definitely want to make sure that I noted, and I think it's important for you to know when you're weighing whether to use NationBuilder. Again, I don't think you shouldn't use it. I just think you need to keep that in mind. But at the same time, I think it's really important to have competition in the space and to make sure that there's not just the one service provider, that there's many other service providers in the space, and you can, it's all different services, different servers, different places, all that kind of stuff. So it's not just one, when an attack happens, everything goes down. So something to keep in mind, and I think it's important for you to consider when you're making these kind of options in terms of what you roll out online. So that was just me this time. It was only me talking a bit of a monologue this week, but I want to thank you for watching. I want to thank you for continuing to watch, and please make sure you join us next week, and Mark will be back on the mend, and we will discuss some different topics and ideas from the intersection of tech and politics, as we usually do every week on RootsCast. Thanks again. Have a great day.